At the beginning of the film, a married couple named David Cuevas and Alexis had just woken up from their sleep in their bedroom. The wife, Alexis, told her husband that she had just had a nightmare about their 2 children drowning. Seeing that his wife was deeply worried, David tried to calm her, saying to her that it was nothing more than a dream. A short time later, their daughter entered the room to wake them up and told them to get ready for the day. It turned out that that day was an important day because Alexis's family was gathering at their house to celebrate her niece's quinceañera or 15th birthday, as it was a crucial celebration that marks a girl's transition from childhood to teenagerhood. Shortly after having breakfast with his family, David rushed to work at an auto electronics store where he employed his cousin, a woman named Lupe. However, he was often irritated with Lupe because she often hosted parties with her friends at the store, leaving the place a mess. He had even once threatened to fire her, but Lupe never changed her behavior. Not long after, as David and Lupe were getting ready for work at the shop, a man named Creeper arrived. Creeper himself was David's best friend and work partner. He and David then got ready to leave when, suddenly, a group of thugs, led by a man named Victor, a newly promoted gangster, showed up. Despite being a gang boss, Victor showed some respect and fear of David and Creeper, because both were known as the most dangerous gangsters in the area. Victor then informed them that his gang was frequently being bullied and disrespected by rival gang members and asked the 2 of them to resolve the issue. Then, he handed over the tax payment to the 2, as it was mandatory for gangs in the area if they wanted their businesses to operate safely and without interference. David then emphasized that all local gangs in the area were required to submit and pay a 30% tax on their total monthly profits. It was then revealed that David and Creeper were the tax collectors who oversaw the business profits from 43 local gangs for their boss, a mysterious figure called Wizard, who ran his business from behind prison bars. And if any gang dared to disobey or plan a revolt, David and Creeper would not hesitate to massacre them. Afterward, David and Creeper visited David's uncle, Lua, to confirm the payment Victor had just made. With Wizard locked up in prison, Uncle Lewis was temporarily in charge of the business, including setting the tax rates and payment deadlines for all the gangs in their area, while David and Creeper continued their job, collecting tax payments from gangs across the city. Later, during their drives, David kept speaking about his happy little family and always mocked Creeper for being a single man at his age. However, Creeper seemed entirely uninterested in making a commitment, even though David often tried to match him with attractive women he knew. Not long after, they eventually arrived at the hideout of the gang that had bothered Victor's gang and immediately demanded the remaining tax payment that the gang hadn't paid to them. It was clear that the gang members were terrified of David, especially after he threatened to decapitate them if they did not comply with his order to stop harassing Victor's gang. Later, while visiting another gang's headquarters, David and Creeper saw a man from a gang called Bloods being tortured for sleeping with one of the gang members' girlfriends. Upon seeing that, David suddenly ordered them to release the man. He explained that their action would only ignite a gang war that would hurt both sides. After hearing this, the gang members finally understood and followed his command. After being released, David and Creeper took the man back to his gang's headquarters, where they met the group's leader, a man named Bone. David then explained to him that the incident involving his man was a personal matter that had nothing to do with gang business or territory war. Thankfully, after hearing David's clarification, Bone agreed to a truce, as a war over such a trivial thing would seriously disrupt the gang's businesses and cause them massive losses. David and Creeper then resumed their work to visit another gangster who used his clothing store as a disguise for illegal business. Upon seeing their arrival, the man who owned the business quickly handed over the monthly tax payment in cash. However, the man then said something that greatly angered Creeper, causing him to pull a gun on the gangster. Seeing the heated situation, David quickly stepped in and stopped his partner and told him not to act rashly. Soon after, David received a phone call from his wife, Alexis, who asked him to rush to a specific clothing store because it turned out that she wanted her husband to intimidate the store owner who was refusing to sell a certain dress to her niece, a gown the niece loved and really wanted to wear for her birthday. Without a second thought, David immediately complied with her request to ensure his niece got the dress she wanted. After that, David and Creeper resumed their work until they finished for the day. After that, in the evening, when David and Alexis were counting all the money they had collected from the gangsters, they immediately realized that the money Victor had deposited did not match the specified amount and was $20,000 short. Upon knowing this, David instantly became angry, but Alexis quickly tried to calm him down. To solve the problem, David and Creeper immediately drove to Victor's house to confront him for not obeying the rules. Soon after, when the two arrived, Victor immediately told his wife to retrieve the remaining money he had hidden inside the refrigerator to give to them. David was ready to shoot Victor for the problem he caused, but as he was about to pull the trigger, Victor finally confessed that he did that because he desperately needed the money to pay for his daughter's leukemia treatment. He then showed them several photos of his daughter being treated in the hospital as proof. As a loving father himself, David understood Victor's dire situation and decided not to take the money. He then told Creeper to leave immediately. On their way home, David suddenly received a message from Uncle Lewis, who instructed him to collect a tax payment of $200,000 from a gangster named Venom. After receiving that order, they immediately rushed to Venom's location without wasting more time. Upon their arrival at Venom's place, they were greeted by a woman named Gata, who immediately invited them in to see the big boss. Seeing their arrival, Venom quickly pulled out a stack of cash as the tax payment. However, just as Creeper was about to take the money, Venom stopped him and said that the money was not for them. Soon after, a man named Conejo entered the room and declared that Venom would only pay taxes to him from now on. He further said that soon all gangsters in the area would be paying taxes only to him. Upon hearing this, David tried to keep his cool and asked Creeper to just leave, knowing the place was surrounded by Conejo's armed henchmen, and they could not win a fight against all of them. On the drive home, Creeper was visibly annoyed but also excited, as he had been craving the fierce gang war that would soon happen, following Conejo's statement. He said that he missed the days when they fought a lot, because he had grown bored with his job recently. However, David told him to remain calm, and suggested they plan a strategy to deal with Conejo, who turned out to be no ordinary person, but the leader of the criminal organization dominating the other side of the city. The two then met with Uncle Lewis and explained everything that happened at Venom's place and Conejo's bold statement. Upon hearing that, Lewis explained that all the gangsters on the other side of the city were terrified of Conejo because he was an extremely cruel and dangerous person. He then revealed that back then, Conejo respected Wizard so much, but after Wizard was imprisoned, Conejo took the opportunity and intended to take control of the entire city. Knowing that they couldn't let Conejo do what he planned, David suggested that they attack Conejo and his lackeys, but Uncle Lewis instead decided to hold a vote on whether they should attack Conejo and his men or try to make peace with him. Later, as David and Alexis hosted a large party at their house for Alexis's niece's birthday, Uncle Lewis arrived and informed David that he and Conejo would hold a meeting. He told David that Conejo would apologize for challenging them and promised to immediately leave their territory. David was relieved to hear this, thinking there would be no bloodshed as he had feared. After Uncle Lewis left, David danced with his wife and enjoyed the party. However, around midnight, Gata suddenly showed up at the party and asked David to check his phone before ordering both him and Creeper to go to a nightclub. Once they arrived, they met Conejo and Gata. David immediately asked about his uncle's whereabouts, and Conejo casually said that he had killed Uncle Lewis and then showed David his uncle's severed head. Upon seeing that, David desperately tried to restrain himself, even though he was really mad and devastated by his uncle's murder. Conejo then offered David and Creeper a position in his crew and promised them far greater profits if they agreed to join his organization. He then balled his hand into a fist and demanded that David kiss all his rings as a sign that he agreed to join his organization. Of course, David refused to do it and ignored his request. He immediately left the place with Creeper. Their refusal proved to be a harsh slap in Conejo's face. The next day, David gathered the remaining of his loyal subordinates and planned an attack on Conejo and his henchmen. However, in the middle of the meeting, Gata and Conejo's men launched a surprise attack. Causing chaos. Everyone tried to save themselves, including David, who was worried about his family's safety. After the attack, Conejo's men successfully eliminated all of David's remaining men and captured Creeper. Meanwhile, David managed to escape and rushed to pick up Alexis at her workplace and intended to take her to a safe location. During the drive, he received a video call showing Gata smashing Creeper's legs with a hammer. and Conejo, who stomped him to death. David was utterly furious to see that, but he had no way to save Creeper. Soon after, David and Alexis picked up their children from school. He then took his family to a hotel to secure their safety. After they arrived, Alexis pleaded with her husband not to fight Conejo after everything that had happened, as she was afraid of losing him. Knowing how worried his wife was, he complied with her and promised to take them away and start a new life. Before doing so, however, he had a few things to take care of, including sending their children to his sister Delia where they would be safe, and then went to Lupe's house to retrieve something. He soon arrived at Lupe's home and instructed her to leave immediately because it was no longer safe. After that, he went to the backyard and started digging for the money he had buried there. There, he found almost $2 million. Seeing that crazy amount of money, Lupe immediately asked where he had gotten them. David finally revealed that the money was the result of a robbery he and Creeper had committed 9 years ago. After packing all the money into a suitcase, David rushed back to the hotel to meet Alexis, but he was shocked to find that his wife had been killed. To make matters worse, he also found out that his children had disappeared. Soon after, Conejo then called David and gave him 2 hours to bring the ransom money to him because he had David's children with him. In a state of desperation, David rushed to see Bone and revealed that all of his men were dead after Conejo, who intended to seize control of the city, killed them. Not only that, but he also told Bone about his murdered wife and missing children, forcing him to ask for Bone's help to rescue his children. Upon hearing that, Bone agreed to help David and gathered his loyal Bloods gangsters to attack Conejo. Long story short, David and the Bloods raided a drug house owned by Conejo and killed everyone. David then interrogated one of them by dragging his face along the ground from a moving car, and then killed him after retrieving information about his children's whereabouts. Shortly after, David and the Bloods finally arrived at the location. There, they found David's children unharmed, with no one there except Conejo's grandmother, who willingly revealed Conejo's hiding place. After arriving at Conejo's hideout, David choked a guard to death. On the other hand, Bone was nearly captured, but fortunately, he managed to kill 2 of Conejo's men. David then forced his way into Conejo's office, where he killed Gata without hesitation. A battle between him and Conejo ensued soon after. Initially, David was overpowered and severely wounded by Conejo, but he managed to turn the tables and brutally murdered the man. After the final fight, Bone, who had survived the chaotic raid, carried David out of the location. When he suggested that David get immediate treatment for his wounds, David instead left the car and contacted Wizard, who was revealed to be his father. He then explained everything that had just occurred, but Wizard instead congratulated him, saying that he had successfully become the new ruler of the entire Mexican mafia after killing Conejo. However, David refused to follow his father's path and immediately hung up the phone.